Hello and welcome to the state I'm in, where every conversation points north. Here we discuss topics that Alaskans and perhaps everyone should care about. It is my great privilege to have Dr. Bob Ledda on today's episode. Dr. Bob grew up in Texas, a lifelong science enthusiast with a deep love for the outdoors. He graduated from the University of Texas Southwestern and has been practicing emergency medicine for 30 years. About 12 years ago, he shifted his focus from the reactive medicine he'd been accustomed to in the emergency department to proactive health, dedicating himself to learning what true wellness and preventative care looked like. Today, Dr. Bob leads community health and wellness and is dedicated to empowering his patients with science-backed health strategies. You can learn more about his work by visiting drbobslongevity.com. If you're familiar with the Huberman Lab podcast or any work by Dr. Peter Attia, who has a book titled Outlive, also has a podcast called The Drive, Perform by Dr. Andy Galpin, or familiar with any of the works of Dr. Casey Means, who also has a recent book titled Good Energy. If any of those names or books sound familiar, I think you're in for a very special treat. On today's episode, we'll dive deep with Dr. Bob as we explore something he calls the lifestyle prescription. We'll explore topics like hormone therapy, supplementation, and we'll look at how diet and exercise play a pivotal role in our health and wellness. We'll catch a glimpse of the comprehensive care and attention that Dr. Bob takes with his patients, from utilizing the diagnostic tools available to him to spending time with his patients gathering history. In doing so, he's able to treat his patients with a precision and expertise that is next to none. By talking to him today, there is no question in my mind that this man is in the data, looking up the research, and is fully committed to seeing better health outcomes for his patients. While medical topics and various health protocols are discussed on today's episode, please always consult your primary health provider before making any changes that may impact your health. Dr. Bob, you made it.
Made it out here.
Glad to have you. So tell me where you grew up.
Grew up in Seabrook, Texas, outside of Clear Lake, which ultimately got annexed by Houston. So basically Houston area. Went to high school, Clear Lake High School, played varsity baseball. That was my sport.
Okay. Brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I got 3 sisters.
Okay. 3 sisters.
Yeah.
So where are you at in the pecking
They're all
order?
younger. I picked on them all incessantly. I was a vicious brother.
Okay. What'd your parents do for work?
My dad worked for a Shell Oil Company. He
Okay.
was more like an executive type person, office administrative sort of job. And my mom was a night nurse.
Where did medical school come into the picture for you? At what point did you think hey, I might want to be a doctor?
Well, I loved the sciences ever since I was young. I always excelled in math and science, struggled in history and English. Not struggled meaning I couldn't make A's, I made B's.
Okay.
Okay, that wasn't
Better than
failing.
me.
But kind of whizzed through sciences. And so, I started out in college as a fisheries biology major. And I got about into my second year, and a couple of the professors realized that I had some potential and kind of harassed me about being a fisheries biologist major. They're like, What are you going to do with that? You're going to end up being a teacher like us. You'll be broke and won't be able to provide for your family. Yeah, that's just a quote, so I'm not trying to say anything negative about teachers. But that was a quote from one of my professors. He's like, why don't you become an engineer or a doctor or something?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the first seed, and I had some exposure. My mom was a nurse, so I hadn't really thought much about it, and I just said, well, I guess I could go take the MCAT. So about my third year, so I shifted and started doing what was necessary for pre-med, but I also was still following the biology direction, and I just took the MCAT, and I did really well on it. And so at that point, now you've got an MCAT, you got a good GPA, and it's like, well, I could take these 2 things and apply to medical school, having not really committed mentally that I wanted to go to medical school, but I took the next step and I applied. And then the next thing you know, everywhere I applied, I got interviews, and I got to tell you, they're good at sucking you in. I mean, they make it sound like the coolest thing ever. You're so excited when you go to that medical school interview, and I interviewed at all the University of Texas branches and ended up at University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. It's actually considered Harvard of the South.
Okay.
It's one of the top, or at least I know it used to be.
That's what people in Texas say, Harvard or the South.
Yeah, it's like one of the top 5 medical schools in the country. I mean, they've got credit to a lot of Nobel Peace Prizes in medicine and stuff.
Pretty legit.
It's where the cholesterol receptor was discovered. Stormy
Claim
Jones.
to fame.
Stormy Jones, the little girl that was born with no cholesterol receptors, got a heart transplant. Brown and Goldstein, I believe, were the two physicians that were UT Southwestern Medical School clinicians that discovered the cholesterol
I didn't know
receptor.
that. I feel like I've heard of that name and that story.
Yeah.
I didn't know that that's where it was at.
Yeah, I'm surprised I drug that out of the memory banks. That was a long time ago. But yeah, so anyways, that's where I went. It was great school. I thought they did a tremendous job educating me. You know, we're going to get to this, but even then, I was a little disillusioned. I thought I was going to learn more about health. And I realized I really didn't like disease that much. But once that ball starts rolling, that snowball's growing so fast rolling downhill, you can't stop it. You drop out. You got loans to pay back, and you got no way to make the money. So, like, once you decide you're in, you're in. They barely will let you fail.
Gotcha.
Okay, I mean, so I completed the training and learned all about disease, but I didn't learn very much about health, unfortunately.
How long were you a doctor in Texas before you made the transition to Alaska?
So I completed my medical school training. I graduated June 1990.
Okay.
I went and did an internship in emergency medicine at University of Alabama, Birmingham.
Okay.
And then I did my completed training in emergency medicine at Methodist Hospital of Indianapolis. And so I finished that in June of 1993.
Okay.
And then it's probably a longer story than we need to get into about how I nailed the job here.
Sure.
But it would be I'd skip over a big part was the year that I got out of college and before going to med school, I got the opportunity to come up here and commercial salmon fish in Alaska for one of my professors in college. That's what he did in the summers.
Okay.
So then I was done for because all I cared about was Alaska.
Yeah.
And now I had to go finish med school and residency.
Gotcha.
And I just wanted to be back here every day.
Okay. Now it's making sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, when I finished residency, I started applying for jobs here, and I was fortunate in that the place that I fell in love with, commercial fishing out in Cook Inlet on a drift boat, the Kenai Peninsula, Mount Spur, Mount Iliamna, the Kenai River. I mean, I was drunk.
So did you get hooked when you first visited Alaska, or were you infatuated with outdoors in Texas, or is that something that you just experienced once you got here that you were hooked?
I've been an outdoorsman my entire life. You know, that's a blessing if you're an outdoorsman. And if we get into the lifestyle prescription, I'll sort of explain why it's such a blessing.
We will, for sure.
So I love the outdoors. In fact, I was a little disillusioned living in Texas, which is the second largest state in the world, and it fits inside that one, by the way. Sorry about that, guys. I still love you, Texans, but you know, we can put you inside of that right there.
Yeah.
Texas is a system of highways with barbed wire fences on either side. And so I was a little disillusioned with the lack of freedom, and Alaska clearly had that. So I had my eyes on Alaska for a long time. You know, I stepped off the plane on June 22nd, 1986 at 11:30 at night. It was the day after summer solstice. It happened to be a clear blue day. The sun was setting behind the Alaska range. I got out of that plane, walked onto the tarmac in Anchorage, and I went, this is where I'm living.
Home.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's how Alaska impacted me. I knew it from that minute.
Yeah.
I was living in Alaska.
That's awesome. So I don't know if people realize health, wellness, science-based tools for everyday life. I mean, that's the tagline for the Huberman podcast. Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a neuroscientist. He's at Stanford in California. Dr. Peter Attia, I know you're definitely familiar with him. His book, I got his book right back here.
Absolutely. I've been through that book
He's in Austin, I think. I think that's where he lives and practices,
That's
in Austin.
Yes.
Dr. Andy Galpin, he's a exercise physiologist. He has a podcast called Perform. You have all these great minds in the podcast space that, you know, they've went to school, they've done the work, they've seen the patients, they've put in the time, and they're bringing along everyday people into that space, into that mindset. There's definitely a gap, and these great minds out there are kind of bringing us along with them, and it's a huge privilege. So I want to talk about the first time I met you, and I don't know if you remember this, but I was brand new here in the peninsula. This was in 2020. I moved during COVID and was getting oriented at the hospital and one of the clinics. And I walk into the clinic that day and you happen to be working. So the nurse is showing me around and they're like, and this is the doctor's pod. And so I walk over to the doctor's pod and there's this man face down, elbows tucked in, just cranking out push-ups like, there was a drill sergeant with his foot on his back, just cranking them out. And I'm just standing there awkwardly waiting to introduce myself. And then lo and behold, you stand up, dust off your hands and hold out your hand. You're like, "Hi, I'm Bob." And I was like, man, this guy's pretty legit. Now, I think it was around the new year that this happened. And so in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe, he's doing some, new year, new me thing. A little did I know that this was just the kind of person you are. Flash forward to, conversations we've had past that about like genome testing and, you wearing a ruck in the clinic, doing laps in between patients.
Hey, my record now is 8.2 miles on a clinic day
on a clinic
of walking.
day. That's amazing. I just walked in right now and you're doing air squats. Like, you have a certain passion, and I would say it would borderline on obsession with health and wellness, and it's infectious. When I'm around you, we talk that kind of stuff. When other people are around you, people that you may not even know, they're asking you questions about their diet or like, how they can maybe improve with wherever they're at. And it's really special and it's valuable. And that's why when I started this, I know who I want to have on the show, because you address a lot of the topics that people are interested in and concerned about. And you're more than happy to share that story.
Yeah. So you said a word, obsession, and I am obsessed, but I'm going to tell you what I'm obsessed with. I'm obsessed with life. Okay. And I mean, it's going to be, I have a tendency to tears, so I'm trying to get through this. Life's a gift, and you know how I feel about where that gift has come from. It's a God-given gift. There was a creator. I've studied, I've got a lot of books on my shelf, and some of them are like, Signature in the Cell. The audacity of thinking that a cell just sprang up from some soup. It's not possible. It's been statistically analyzed. There was a designer. Okay. To me, that's God. And I owe it to God to preserve this life so I can do as much good for the people around me that I care about, my community, as possible. And if I don't take care of the vessel he gave me to the best of my ability, I'm peeing the bed. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where my obsession comes from. It's not that hard. The lifestyle prescription that I follow is not that unmanageable. It's a lot of little things that you do consistently. And if you keep those up, it adds to a huge difference in outcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to go into the lifestyle
Sure.
prescription. One thing before we get into that though is there was I don't know if you want to call it an epiphany, a pivotal moment. There was something that got your attention in the midst of your ER career. Do you want to go into that story of what kind of brought you around to where you're at today? Right.
So I'll back up a little bit. You talked about how great the clinicians are around us, and those clinicians, I never throw, as Dr. Attia would call it, a medicine 2.0 physician under the bus. Most of them are not nefarious. They're doing a job that they were taught in medical school.
Exactly.
Which is a job I was taught. Yeah. And what it is to search for a disease and then prescribe a medicine. Med schools are controlled by the pharmaceutical industry, and it is the wealthiest industry on the planet.
Yeah.
Okay. And now the pharmaceutical industry is nefarious to some extent. I tell people all the time, I jerked people from the jaws of death as an emergency room physician for 3 decades because of the power the pharmaceutical industry gave me, but they didn't do it because they loved you. It's profit driven. Yeah. So we're taught disease. We're not taught health. And that was not something I was pleased about, because I intuitively, as a kid that bought a weight set at 12 years old and started paying attention to the bodybuilders and what they were doing at 12, and having had that as an underlayment of my life, resistance training my whole life. And I know that's a big part of why my health is so profound right now for a man who's about to turn 61 in a couple weeks. That platform was where I practiced my life. And I get to med school thinking I'm going to learn I'm going to be a genius about health. Nothing, man. Yeah. What they taught me was mostly wrong. That doesn't make the medicine 2.0 doctors bad. I needed them for my son the other day. We'll probably talk about that. They fill a role, but it's not the role that I want to fill any longer. I faced that disease. It's an ugly place to live, watching people get sick and die. All you can do is throw the medicine at it because you don't have time to interface with them and say, look, I'm going to teach you how to not have the disease. That's my why now. Okay. And really, the overlay of my why is that slideshow of my life and all the wonderful things I've got to do, the beautiful places I've seen, enjoyment with my family members, the adventures. That's the why. Build yourself that portfolio of photos and go, life is so worth it. I'm going to start taking control. I am going to use that to inspire me to follow these things that we're learning at the scientific level now at a scary speed because of AI.
Yeah.
Okay. But we know a lot about health. And I went back and studied it. And how did that happen? Well, you know, you're sitting there. I'm 47 years old. I'm an ER doctor, lifelong exerciser, but hormone decline and not knowing how to eat, even though you thought you did, following the medical doctor prescription for the healthy diet, had started to put a little weight on me. You know, I was probably 20 pounds overweight and exercising. So I'm pretty strong still and I'm relatively fit, but I'm also starting to get a little run down. Energy levels are low. And I was working a swing shift. I went into the ER, sat down in my little cubicle and was logging in, and a nurse stuffed an EKG in my face and said, I need you in room 5 right now. I mean, I'm not even logged in. I'm like, yeah, I guess you do. I mean, it was a STEMI, we call it, a ST segment elevation MI. I ran into the room, started to quiz the guy. He's 47 years old, same age as me. And he's probably about 20 pounds overweight. So first thing I do is rule out that he can't take thrombolytics, the clot buster that'll open the artery and hopefully save some of that heart muscle.
Yeah.
Okay. He's good for the clot buster. So I ordered it. I got that going. Now I'm asking a little bit more about, like, you know, why does he have this heart attack at 47 years old? So you're going through the major risk factors, and the 4 big ones back in the day were diabetes. Nope. Cigarette smoking. Nope. Family history, which is the big one. Okay. That's what tightens up the ER doctor when you tell him your brother just had a heart attack. He's like, uh-oh. Family history and hypertension. Okay. Smaller risk factors, obesity. He wasn't obese. He was overweight. So was I. And lipid panel. He didn't know his. I knew mine. I got bad lipids. Okay. So here I'm seeing in the mirror a 47-year-old guy with no real risk factors, kind of like me. Mild risk factor, and he's a little overweight, and maybe or maybe doesn't have a terrible cholesterol panel. He doesn't know, but he's losing heart muscle. Life's going to change. Well, thrombolyse him, send him off. Don't know the outcome. That's part of the ER doc, right? But I thought, we blow it. Why do we not diagnose this ahead of time? I knew there had to be a better way, but I didn't know what it was. That night, I go home, watching TV, trying to stay up late because I'm going to transition to nights. And about 3 in the morning, a commercial comes on by a company, Synergenics. And probably people remember this commercial. They used to advertise by TV. Old guy said, how does this doctor keep getting younger and younger? And they got a picture of him at 56, you know. He's a little dumpy looking with his shirt off on a fishing boat. And then at 60, he's kind of got some stature and he's kind of trimming out and getting a little V. And then at 70, he looks pretty good. And then at 74, he's a wrinkly Tarzan. And I'm like, I want to know what the heck that guy knows that I don't know. I made the phone call. They harassed me for a year, and I finally went and I did the training. When I did the training, it was a week-long course that covered the lifestyle prescription and something I hadn't considered, but hormone optimization, which I didn't know was a thing, you know, and of course, supplementation, and then this strategy for investigating people's health in a fashion that supersedes the basic labs and the basic, you know, evaluations that people in the insurance space model get. And so I did that. You got to be a patient if you paid all the money for the course, which I did. And when I came out the end at a week later, I was like, this is going to change my life. I changed how I was eating. I transformed my exercise regimen some based on what I learned. I learned that I was overall pretty healthy, but I did feel like I met the criteria for maybe having testosterone deficiency, not true hypogonadism where medicine 2.0 would pay for it, but lower than optimal. And, you know, I started on testosterone therapy back then. And I can tell you in 3 weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, this should be illegal. I knew that the problems, the reasons why I didn't want to get out of bed and go take people on an ultimate expedition, flying them around Alaska because I was tired. It was that. I just didn't have enough testosterone receptors bound at that point in my life for my receptor sensitivity and my own personal set point. My feelings of well-being had declined, and I reversed that. And then, using the testosterone prescription to enhance the exercise prescription is the biggest benefit. And I've not peed the bed on that one. I've exercised a lot in the last 13 years.
Yeah. So with the lifestyle prescription, I think a barrier to people taking charge of their health is like, well, I can't get to the gym. I can't, it's a physical place. They think that like, I have to have the time to go to this place, to do the thing, to be healthy. And I think the lifestyle prescription is more than just a place that you're going. It's incorporating health at all aspects. It's a lifestyle. And I think that is the key there. So someone that wants to know more finds you in Soldotna and they're like, I'm having issues with my health. What is or maybe not issues with their health, but they're wanting to find what you found, and that's an energy for life and to really embrace that life. What is the first place that you start with them in addressing what their lifestyle prescription is going to be?
Well, so that's a little hard to jump to because the first thing we do is an in-depth analysis so we understand their needs and where there may be deficiencies.
Yeah. Well, let's go. Yeah, we can talk about that. Why don't you go through like just the different things that you could go through with those people? Well,
so typically I'm going to want to know a lot more about your physiology than you've probably ever found out from the typical medical system. Okay. So rather than just knowing what your random blood sugar is on your wellness panel once a year, or maybe a fasting one, I want to understand your sugar metabolism in great detail. You've probably heard this from most of the other guys. Insulin insensitivity is the root of all metabolic disease. Okay, so what do you think the first labs I look at? Top of my flow sheet is fasting blood sugar, fasting insulin level. That allows me to calculate for evidence of insulin insensitivity, and hemoglobin A1C, which tells me how much sugar you've attached to the hemoglobin molecule in your red blood cells over about the last 3 months, because that's how long they live. And then scientists have figured out a calculation to tell me what your average blood sugar was, okay, over the last 3 months. I have to make people understand the why. Why do I care? Well, first of all, sugar sticks to everything. So sugar is one of the drivers of vascular disease. In fact, I have a review paper that I need to fully read that has just come out that's saying hemoglobin A1C or LDL, what's more important? You know what they think? LDL being the small, dense cholesterol particles that tend to clog the arteries. A1C. Glycation is a greater driver of vascular disease than the particles that cause it. Okay? So start with that. So now I have a sense of where are you at on this pathway? Do you already have signs of insulin insensitivity, which happens before the A1C climbs? As you become more insulin insensitive, you need more insulin to keep your sugar in that normal range. Well, pancreas just keeps making more. But sooner or later, that baby's waving the white flag, man. It can't do it. Then the A1C starts climbing. Medicine 2.0, they may figure that out when you're peeing a lot and you don't understand why and you're thirsty all the time. I'm going to be going, there's some smoke here. Yeah. So this is an area of concern. And then the lifestyle prescription is going to have specific needs analysis addressing insulin insensitivity. Okay. What's the next thing? Well, basic chemistry panel. Got to make sure kidney function, electrolytes, liver function, iron studies. We're looking at that. The lipid panel. Most people get a concentration-based lipid panel. That means how much of that clear fluid in the blood, after they spin it down and pack the cells at the bottom, they go send that to Quest. How much of that is LDL in milligrams per deciliter, a concentration? And we use that along with some equations that look at population-based outcomes, like, if you know your total cholesterol, your HDL, your blood pressure, maybe you plug in family history. Do you have diabetes? Are you on blood pressure medicines? There's various equations out there. And the way doctors typically go, here's you get your statin, is when your cholesterol panel's bad enough that at your age, with your blood pressure, your risk is such that your chance of having a heart attack is greater than 7.5% in the next 10 years. Then they go, the risks of statin therapy are outweighed by the benefits. That's a total lack of precision, particularly when I see people all the time who have, in fact, the one I looked at yesterday, a cholesterol panel, pretty high numbers, like total of 230, LDL's over 130, but this person has massive LDL because I fractionated their panel, okay? Which is important to do at least once, so I know how your liver builds those packages. If you have tiny little LDL, and I have massive LDL, and I don't, by the way. Well, let's switch that. If you have big, massive LDL, and I have tiny little LDL, and we both have a LDL of 130, I have a lot more tiny particles, which are more easily going to wedge between those endothelial cells and start clogging arteries than you have, because you get to the same concentration with less particles, and they're bigger, less atherogenic, meaning less likely to cause atherosclerosis. So, got to learn the lipid panel. And then there's some protein markers. I know the LP little a on my children, because though we don't have really good medications and we don't have lifestyle prescriptions that are shown to affect it, we know it doubles your risk of heart attack and stroke, regardless of your other parameters. So it's like, you need to know if you got that target on your back, maybe it'll light a little fire under you and make you take things more seriously.
My provider thought I was a crazy person for asking about for that lab after reading Dr. Tia's book. He didn't think I was a crazy person, but it was kind of like, how do you know about that? And then like,
and what am I going to do about it if it's elevated?
Exactly.
It's not what you're going to do about it, Doc. It's what I'm going to do about it. I'm always looking for a little fire under my butt. Anytime I can get a little something else to motivate me, makes me happy. Next thing, inflammatory markers. Most people don't even get a high sensitivity CRP ever checked in their life. They don't know what their homocysteine is. We know that these two markers are associated with elevations in vascular disease. They are actionable. Lose weight, your high sensitivity CRP comes down. If you don't metabolize homocysteine well, I'm a poor metabolizer. Done my whole genome. I take a high quality complex B vitamin formula. I drove my homocysteine into, originally Quest Lab high levels to well below our goal of 9 or less. I went from like 10, 11, 12 to 6 to 7 by taking just a B vitamin. But like, if your homocysteine 7 and your MCV is normal, I'm not giving you a B vitamin. I mean, I'll give you one if you want it. It's probably not going to hurt you, but you don't need one. Save your money there.
What's MCV?
Mean corpuscular volume. That's something that you see when people have poor B vitamins, particularly B12. Their red blood cells tend to get larger, so their MCV will be higher. And if you have iron deficiency, smaller. The next thing, of course, is I'm going to find out what their hormones are, because if they're checking 5 boxes that sound like their testosterone's in the dirt and their levels are at the lower end of the normal bell curve for adult males, that may be implied in why they don't feel that great.
Do you see hormone issues with women as well, or do you see it mostly with men?
Well, the menopause is death if they don't address it. I'm sorry. It's one of the biggest failures in medicine is that we have not armed the medical community with enough doctors that understand hormones are not dangerous. They're the answer to preserving wellness. Look, it's probably a good time to talk about what a hormone does. A hormone's a molecule that's created by one of the organs in your endocrine system, okay? It's a signaling molecule to other cells. Pretty much every cell in your body has a receptor for every hormone that your endocrine system makes. And what happens is those hormones float around, they bind that receptor, lock and key, and then the receptor internalizes the hormone into the cell, carries it to the nucleus, where it goes and turns genes on in your DNA that make your cells work right.
Sounds like a big deal.
Well, but as we age, our cellular health is declining. So those organelles that can produce these hormones start to produce less of them, affecting every cell in our body. Okay? Now look, this is not a scientific study. This is Bob's world of logic. I've done a pretty good job, practiced emergency medicine for 30 years, never talked to a lawyer, by having a logical approach to stuff and just being a little bit meticulous, okay? Now, it just makes sense that if I can keep my cells getting signaling molecules that are turning on the genes that make them young, I might have a little better outcome.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't prove it, but you know what? Science supports the logic, okay?
Yeah.
And now I do have lots of well-designed clinical evidence trials that show that this is the approach. Are we going to be cramming it down the throats of the people coming out of medical school 2.0? Probably not. Why? Because who's controlling the curriculum? The pharmaceutical industry. Are hormones expensive? No. Is doing them right a little expensive? Yes. It's not free to have somebody that's outside of the disease model, the insurance-based model. They don't care about me following your labs to make sure I'm doing it right. So you're on your own. You got to invest in your own personal health. Medicine 2.0 is for, even though you invested in it, something bad happened. You might crash your bike or fall out of a moose stand. You need medicine 2.0, but you need an approach for yourself where you invest in your health. So that kind of got me through most of the labs. Now, we also do a bunch of diagnostic stuff. Am I worried about frailty? Do you have central adipose, meaning visceral fat?
Which you see through like a DEXA scan?
I do a DEXA scan, yeah. So I'm tracking parameters and I'm showing people how I'm improving these things, right? VO2 max, it's a stress test. It also tells me what heart rate you become aerobic and what heart rate you become anaerobic. It gives me an idea of your leg strength. It tells me what your functional, endurance capacity is. VO2 max is probably the single best test to predict longevity of any test we can run at this point in time. If you're fit, you just don't die. If you want to see why I think exercise is so important, on Dr. Bob's Longevity, which we'll get to, my website, I'm pretty sure it's the very first thing on my health hub is survival of the fittest, the strong survive. And I've pulled a bunch of scientific studies that make you realize this is not a subtle effect. People who are strong and fit way outlive the weak and unfit.
What about, go ahead.
No. So, that now allows me, I've got this overview of the patient. I've scrutinized them. I've looked at their arteries in their neck. I got a sense of, are they making disease faster than normal? Some microvascular testing. We also do CNS vital signs. How well is the squash functioning? And I get all of this. Now I've kind of got their needs analysis to help me design supplement regimens to direct me in where I think they might be having trouble. And now I can start to preach the lifestyle prescription, specifically emboldening the areas where the lifestyle prescription impacts the problems they have, the issues that I'm seeing in them after this comprehensive evaluation.
And that's a significant amount of time with a provider. Between the testing and then I think on your website you say you spend like a significant amount of hours with your patients after all of this is done, honing in on, we have the data, what's the plan? And just to sit down with a provider you're lucky if you can get 20 minutes, let alone,
I think it's 15.
Let alone hours. And with the most advanced data, the most up-to-date information you could have, stuff that you are consumed by and always studying, always looking forward with that type of mind. I think that, like you said, it is an investment, but it's one of those that it's invaluable.
The lifestyle prescription, the same generic lifestyle prescription, the very important things are going to treat all diseases, reverse many diseases, okay? But again, you got to understand, figure out what you have and where your strengths and where your deficiencies are. So that you can maybe tweak it in that direction. I think probably one thing to point out is that the biggest biohack that there is for longevity, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other guys in this space and girls would probably say, that's a reasonable statement. It's resistance training. It's muscle mass. Okay? Muscle is an endocrine organ, creates signaling molecules that it sends throughout the body. It reduces your risk of cancer. It's probably more important for reducing your risk of cardiovascular diseases than cardiovascular training, okay? Although the combination of both are important. I'm a great example. I have tremendous disease risk according to my genome. My dad got insulin-dependent diabetes when he got old and fat, and his dad got insulin-dependent diabetes when he got old and fat. And I did my genome. I have 9 separate genes that predispose me to type 2 diabetes, and one of them looks like the bad actor that they probably passed down. It's not that common of a gene, and it looks like wreckage when you read the papers. Do I demonstrate insulin insensitivity? No. Do I have high A1C? No. I mean, I have immaculate sugar metabolism. Why do I attribute that? I've lifted weights my whole life. Insulin, well, your muscles can suck sugar out of your blood without even using insulin. You can open channels. When you move, your muscles need sugar. And if, Casey Means will tell you it's because when you deplete your ATP, your AKMP, it goes up, and that sends a channel into the cell wall, and sugar can now come through without even using insulin.
Yeah.
Great. Point is, muscles suck sugar. Lower sugar, better. We established that early, right?
Yeah.
Glycation drives disease. Muscles suck sugar. Big muscles suck more sugar. Yeah. If you have big muscles and you use them all the time, it's hard to build up a lot of sugar in your blood. Very kind of layman way to describe it. Easy to understand, easy to remember. Yeah. I have trouble remembering AKMP, if that's even the right, I mean, it's like I learn all that stuff. Yeah. It's great that we understand it at the molecular level. I don't think that helps you all that much. I want you to understand big muscles, okay? So, it all starts tying together. So where does testosterone come in? Well, you ask most people, what organ system has the most testosterone receptors? The muscles. Nope.
No?
The brain.
Okay.
It changes behavior. It drives you to the gym. Literally, not literally, but it's like, hey, I want to go exercise. Yeah. It allows you to recover from exercise. You build more muscle mass. Testosterone therapy improves insulin sensitivity immediately with no other intervention. I mean, so all this stuff starts tying together. So muscles, resistance training, exercise is the biggest hack. 10 years ago, I probably would have said no amount of exercise can make up for a crap diet. Now I would say, eating right is important, but make sure you exercise because that's more important. You can make up for some sins if you're training a lot. So exercise is huge. Resistance training, if you have limited time, 2 days a week, very important. Frailty, you die. That's just well established. When you start getting weak, you're not, my grip strength is double the bottom quartile for 60-year-old males. Double the beginning of the top quartile for 60-year-old males. And if you look at grip strength as a proxy for overall musculoskeletal function and how it relates to mortality, it's linear, man. You're crashing, okay? And I'm a 150-pound guy, and I got my right hand grip strength is 135, 145 pounds, okay? But I've been heaving iron my whole life. But yours can be stronger if you start heaving some iron. It's never too late to start. And the lowest hanging fruit, the biggest reduction in mortality with exercise occurs when you're at the bottom level and you just get up to like the next level. It's a 50% reduction in mortality. I'm sitting here fighting at the top to try to get a little better. I'm not getting a whole lot of benefit from that. So exercise, biggest biohack that there is, resistance training, most important aspect. Don't blow off your cardiovascular, but you talked about something when you came in that I think is very important. Movement. We sit too much. I could back up even further. The overall 50,000-foot view, okay? Not even the 30,000 foot, the 50,000 foot. Live like you were alive 10,000 years ago. First of all, I did an experiment with my continuous glucose monitor the other day. I ate my yogurt breakfast, which I have about every third morning. I have Greek yogurt with chia seeds and a scoop of whey protein powder to get the protein up to about 30 grams there. The chia seeds add another 5, and some fruit. It's pretty high glycemic. And I've watched, and it's like, I get a pretty good spike. So the other day, I just ate it slower and walked while I was eating it. And I was listening. I was just doing some training in my ears. Phone in my back pocket, walking around with my bowl, not eating that fast, didn't bump my sugar at all, okay? We were always moving when we were eating 10,000 years ago, especially high glycemic. You were climbing up a tree to get it. We sit and we eat. and then we sit. And that's one of the reasons why I like wearable devices like this ring.
Yeah.
This thing not only biohacks all my information, but it also reminds me, hey, get up and stretch your legs. So the reason you got to walk downstairs when you left. I was doing air squats because otherwise I'm sitting. And sitting is the new smoking, right?
I've heard that. Sitting is the new smoking.
It's terrible. And so, you know, that little bit of movement every day is another big part of exercise. It's very important that you don't allow yourself to sit for long periods of time. Move anytime you get the chance. When God or life circumstances makes you move, be happy about it. Don't, I got to take the trash out. Go, hey, I get to take the trash out. I'm going to carry that heavyweight down the stairs, out to the dumpster, put it in. Oh, I'm so lucky. I'm blessed here. So exercise. Now, that's kind of simple, right? A little mixture of resistance training, some high intensity exercise. Look, when I have older people that are on the couch, I just want to get them moving and do a little bit of resistance training. If you're young enough, you could become an athlete again, 70 or less. Let's turn you into an athlete. Resistance training, high intensity intervals, or some form of sprint interval training. And I will definitely do a video to describe the difference between those two and help people get their head wrapped around it and be on my health hub. Of course, you want to do some long, slow distance, but don't miss out on that. Hey, stand up and move around a lot throughout the day. Don't let yourself stay anchored. So there's that. Now, nutrition. That's a mess, man. Boy, there's a lot to unpackage there. You know, there's a lot of high level sort of general concepts that are easy to discuss. Certainly, I think nutrition is the second biggest pillar of health after exercise. Oh, the paleo is not a bad way to go. I was impressed when I read Rob Wolf, The Paleo Solution. It's a well-written book. I read it when I did my training. It was kind of recommended reading when I did Cinegenics 12 years ago, or 2014 it was. Basic overall concept is eat like we were designed to eat, because that's how our cells evolved. And I think that there's a lot of truthfulness to that. But I'm agnostic when it comes to dietary platforms. I don't eat a strictly paleo diet because I've scrutinized myself. I know I don't have significant sensitivity to oats, for example, but oats are a grain. I've checked my IgG sensitivity. I don't have oats getting through my gut wall. I don't have antibodies to oats. And there's an awful lot of science that says oats reduce colon cancer and lower LDL cholesterol in mine. So it's like, you know what? I like oatmeal. I liked oatmeal my whole life. So I got a great protein meal I make, right? You know, it's not just a bunch of carbs. It's steel cut oats, chia seeds, flax seeds. I'm getting that protein up. I'm getting the fiber up even more, getting some healthy fat in there, some walnuts, and then some berries, okay? No sugar added. If you give up the sugar, your body quits craving it and other stuff starts tasting sweet. So I deviate from the paleo. I also eat legumes, okay? They're not paleo, but again, don't really react to them. If you have a leaky gut, they're the kind of things that can trigger autoimmune diseases. So, you know, there's a real precisionness to this if you want to do all the testing. But any diet, the Mediterranean diet, gets the best marks when they study overall dietary platforms. Now, why is that? Because there's so much good in it, it overcomes the fact that there's too much grain in it, in my opinion. The grains are less refined, which helps. Here we're eating white rice, which makes your sugar go up faster than table sugar. And they're eating whole grains, you know, and there's so many other things in that diet. They eat a lot of fish, small cold water fish that are healthy. They move a lot. Those people don't sit like we do. They eat not a ton of meat and not a lot of processed meat. They eat lots of vegetables. They eat fruits. There's avocados. There's a lot of olive oil, and I do olive oil every day. That is a molecule that reduces cardiovascular risk, improves the health of the microbiome, full of all kinds of polyphenols that just make us work better. I can take any dietary platform and I can show you how to make it terrible. And I can take any dietary platform and probably teach you a way that you could use that platform and have pretty good outcome. The one that I worry about the most, because I experimented in myself and it destroyed me, was vegan. My brain didn't work right. The only thing I did during my 6 weeks of vegan was I took fish oil. So technically I wasn't going to give up my fish oil. And I eventually transitioned to doing a lot of lupin bean because it was so high in protein, because I was trying to keep my protein volume up, because I DEXA'd when I started, so I knew what my muscle mass was.
DEXA scan.
DEXA scan.
Okay.
And I'm training like I normally do, lifting weights. And first off, when I was keeping my protein the same as on my normal diet, which is a modified paleo diet with some legumes and limited grains, all wild almost as far as the protein, the animal protein portion.
Perk of being here, for sure.
Yeah,
Hunting
well, it's a
and fishing
blessing.
and-
Yeah. I've got this DEXA scan. I know what my muscle mass is. I know how I'm doing in the gym. I'm training as hard as normal. Well, I realized I was going to get fat keeping my protein intake where it was, because plants don't have that much protein. So I was eating too much.
Yeah.
So then I researched and found this lupin bean, which is really high in protein. And I was able to not get fatter and keep my protein levels the same, but I still lost strength. And by the end, my brain wasn't working well.
Yeah.
I lost 4 pounds of lean mass in 6 weeks on a vegan diet and got weaker while I was training. I don't want to offend any vegans out there, but I've been an ER doctor for a long time, so I've observed many, many human beings. And I'm a nosy sucker, so I oftentimes figure out somebody's vegan in an ER encounter. I've never seen an old, robust vegan. I mean, look, I want people to survive, and plant-based diets are very important. I eat a plant-based diet. Plants should be very afraid of me. I eat them a lot, okay? But I don't want to just survive. I want to survive and thrive, okay?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I understand the physics of having binocular vision with eyes in front of your head. It's for measuring the distance to prey, and I'm really good at measuring that distance, and I eat a lot of prey. But it's really high quality protein. So I do want to caution people, if they're getting led down that pathway of animal protein is the danger. Keep in mind, if you're in a scientific study and you come out in the high protein group, you got there by eating 3 times a day at McDonald's. That gets you there. You're in the high protein group if you go to McDonald's 3 times a day. I'm not an advocate of that, okay? Now, you want to eat grass-fed beef, like down there, 40%, you know? At ranch, we didn't get a moose this year, so we bought a half a cow. This stuff's amazing. He's had the meat analyzed, way higher amino acid content than average USDA grade A beef. Full of omegas, because he doesn't let them eat any grain, okay? So, you know, you gotta take all that with a grain of salt. So I'm gonna try to, from my memory, tell you what my pillars say in terms of nutrition. Okay, so pick your dietary platform, but within it, try to achieve these things.
Which it sounds like you have freedom to pick your dietary platform. That's kind of what you're getting at, is that you can pick a variety of these, but you can optimize each one of them, and each one kind of has their own pitfalls.
Right.
So
you know, the other one I threw out there that worries me, and I've seen people do very well on the carnivore diet, but you know, look, I've got a great meta-analysis that represents over 1 million patient years of observation, okay? That showed that, you know, if they just looked at a bunch of different studies, and if they were able to determine how much fiber was in the nutrition strategy of the individual studied, and it answered either all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, or cancer mortality. If they could get to any of those 3 endpoints and they could measure fiber in the diet of the questionnaires, they included it in the meta-analysis. They came up with 3 different levels of fiber intake. Low fiber, which was 17 grams or less, intermediate, which was 17 to 25, and 25 or greater. And in all 3 of those categories, if you moved from one category to the next, all 3 went down. All-cause mortality declined, cardiovascular disease mortality declined, and cancer mortality declined, okay? I was like, wonder how much fiber I eat. So I totaled it up. I kind of did my average day with the strategy I had already built from this overview of studying nutritional science. 50 grams, double what it takes to get into the top quarter. Hey, carnivore's kind of hard to hit 50 grams of fiber. You're eating just meat. Can you take Metamucil? Yeah, I mean, I always tell them to. You ought to have some plants in your diet, okay? I mean, and so look, you're not going to ruin your carnivore strategy, which is, why does the carnivore diet work? Because there's no carbs in it. Why do people get heavy? Because carbs drive appetite. So you can be a carnivore and still eat some vegetables for me.
Yeah.
That's what I plead with my carnivores to do. It's like, could you just eat?
Yeah.
Look, you're making eggs anyways. Put some avocado oil in the pan, cut up some mushrooms, some onions, some broccoli, and some bell peppers. Stir fry them in there, and then put your eggs in there. You won't even notice them.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, so that's the point. So what do I think? You should have a high fiber diet. You should consume clean animal protein. So look, is it going to kill you if you have a a grain-fed steak at Smith & Lewinsky's down on the Strip in Vegas? So far, it hasn't, because I might eat an 8-ounce filet there, and it's really good. But don't make it your nutrition plan to eat grain-fed beef every day. Sure, don't make it your nutrition plan to eat processed red meat. Get the chemicals out. If you look, packaged foods, try to make them limited, but we do lead busy lifestyles. A lot of times we are eating out of a lunchbox. I use packaged snacks when I'm flying all summer because I'm eating while I'm flying because I've got to be tending to clients or getting their gear ready when they're eating their lunch on the bank at the next stop. If you got a lot of words in there you don't understand, simple truth, probably don't eat it.
Don't wanna eat it.
It should. They can package snacks without overly processing them. So just because it's in a package isn't a danger. It's how processed is it. And you can determine that by looking at the ingredients, and words that aren't foods are indicating a higher level of processing, right? So anyways, avoid the foreign molecules that never circulated inside a human body prior to man creating them to
Introducing
create shelf-stable foods. Eat as many vegetables as you can stand. I mean, it may taper off at a benefit at about 7 servings a day, and I'd probably get that most days, but there's nobody that studies the nutritional literature. I'm pretty confident there's nobody that's going to argue with me about that. I mean, Gundry may say, there's a couple of those plants that are trying to kill you, so you got to pressure cook them and peel the skin off those peppers, and there's probably for a few individuals that's going to be true, but in general, no. You don't have to fret over eating a few bell peppers, okay? Lots of vegetables, okay? Strategy, get them in multiple times a day, okay? Eat some fruit. Now, caveat, if you're trying to lose weight, don't eat the higher glycemic forms, okay? When I talk to people about nutrition, and most of the time when I'm dealing with patients that are new, they probably want to lose some weight. Not all, but some aren't at ideal body weight. I calculate a body fat percentage for 20% for a male, 25% for a female, and I tell them how much fat they would have to lose based on their DEXA analysis, assuming they don't gain any lean mass, to reach that body fat percentage. At the end of the day, their energy stored is going to be assessed by increasing energy out above energy in. So we got two sides of the equation. We can increase energy out, exercise, move a lot, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, the fancy word for the days of activities of daily living. Sunday wasn't an exercise day for me. It was my off day, but I did so many chores. I busted 700 calories. I just moved a lot. Yeah. Right. We can improve basic metabolic rate back to testosterone, back to resistance training by increasing lean mass. Your basic metabolic rate is controlled by lean mass. We can also tweak our basic metabolic rate on the exercise days occasionally by doing high intensity interval training, because that increases your metabolic rate the next day because you're getting rid of the lactic acid that you built up, and it takes energy to do that. So I'm showing people, okay, here's how to get energy out greater, but energy in, I got a circle in that diagram with a P, and it says protein needs to be the center of every meal. One of the reasons why I'm an advocate of high quality animal protein, because I know that high quality animal protein, or why I tried to make my oatmeal 35 grams of protein instead of the 6 or 8 if I just ate oats, okay? That protein is going to suppress my appetite. How? By making my small intestine release signaling molecules like GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1
Yep.
And so you want to talk about that later. Well, that's what's happening normally in the body. Protein, it sends a signal to your brain when that protein hits your small intestine. It says, hey, stop eating.
Yeah.
You're full. Go grab me a bag of king-size Doritos. Start eating them. Tell me when you get full.
Yeah.
Don't.
You're not. Yeah.
You just keep, why? Because that food is so high glycemic, it jacks your sugar up. Your body responds by dumping insulin. You're probably sitting on your butt watching football, so you're not burning it with your muscles, right? And so now you start storing it as fat because it jacks it up so quickly. What we talk about when we talk about high glycemic foods, the sugar shoots way up. You have to dump more insulin to address that high spike. The food is short acting because it's absorbed so fast, so it's not creating sustained energy. Now you bottom out. You go, I gotta have more Doritos because your brain knows you need sugar.
Yeah.
Your brain's controlling the situation. You got to learn to outthink it. The caveman didn't have Doritos. And if he was eating berries, he was standing while he was doing it,
The caveman had protein, which is what you're saying is that, I mean, GLP-1s are not a miracle drug. I'm sure they have their place, but what you're saying is that these GLP-1s go into effect just by having protein at the center of your meals.
You can do that. You can release your own GLP-1 if you utilize protein when you eat. Most people eat way too little protein. And especially when you get ancient like me, you're in your 60s, the science there, despite the crappy nature of protein in the human diet, in the standard American diet, which is what we're actually evaluating in the nutritional studies. I do not know of a study that controls for protein quality. I would love to see the study on all the Alaskans who are not drinking way too much beer and smoking cigarettes, maybe so kind of a hunter who sort of fits that thing. The hunter fisherman who's otherwise doing a pretty good job with the lifestyle prescription. I'd like to know the science on what that diet does, but we may never have access to that. So the protein can stimulate the release of GLP-1, which tells your brain you're satiated. The other benefit to protein that's important for people to understand, it's really the only macronutrient that uses energy to digest. So you get this bonus when you eat protein. You eat 100 calories of protein, you get 70. Carbohydrates, breaking sugar bonds, that's easy, okay? It doesn't take much digestive energy. Now, mash all those carbohydrates into a bunch of broccoli stems, a little more work, and that sugar doesn't get into your system nearly as fast. The concept of low glycemic versus high glycemic, broccoli has a glycemic index of about 4, and white rice has a glycemic index of 110, higher than table sugar. That means you eat 50 grams of carbohydrates in broccoli, negligible effect on your blood sugar, takes hours for you to get that energy, and you get all those micronutrients. And we just added some fiber for the microbiome. God, are we going to go there? That's a big one.
That's okay.
Okay, so high-level strategy. So I do like a lot of plant-based interventions that I put in my food. I put chia seeds in my oatmeal and in my yogurts. And I also do kefirs with just a shaker bottle if I'm in a hurry. That's what I did today. Okay. I had to get out of here early. I usually don't eat till 10, and we were starting at 10.
Yeah.
Chia seeds have healthy omega-3 fats. ALA is the vegetable omega-3. The DHA and EPA you get from your fish and from your fish oil supplementation. They have 10 grams of fiber, so they're loaded with fiber, and 5 grams of a relatively complete plant protein. So healthy fat, fiber, protein. So you know what? Get some chia seeds in your diet. It's easy to do, right?
Yeah.
And it brings that protein content up and that fiber content up and healthy omegas. So really good strategy. Hemp seed, no fiber, even more protein, 10 grams, and still has all the healthy fats. I like both of those for adding into things. You need to be cooking with avocado oil, and if you're cooking at a low enough temperature, olive oil, and both of those oils need to be getting into your body every day just to get them in. They lower risk of cardiovascular disease. They're full of polyphenols that feed your microbiome. And avocado oil has the highest smoke point of about anything we can cook with, so you don't denature it. So it's great for high temperature cooking. Don't be afraid to eat olives and avocados. I generally eat a half of avocado every day. I used to be afraid of avocados because I knew I had a bad cholesterol panel, and they taught me in medical school that I should avoid fat. So I had a grain-based diet, and I was getting fat, and I farted a lot, okay? And I got off all the grains, and it was like, wow, look, I'm not fat. I'm
Not
losing
bloated.
the weight, you know? And so I eat a very high-fat diet now. Couple of other things that I point out to my patients. Most of the non-caloric sweeteners you need to avoid. Even, I don't think Atia ever addressed non-caloric sweeteners. Casey Means, her book came out relatively recently.
Yeah. Good energy, Dr.
Good
Casey
energy.
Means. Yeah.
She anointed. I agree with. She's a genius. Great story.
I just finished her book last month.
She said erythritol's okay. I don't know if the book came out or if she just hasn't read the science. Don't use sugar alcohols unless you're a kid. Okay. They're non-caloric. They do have some negative effects on the microbiome, but in the United Kingdom, they've shown that people who consume the highest levels of xylitol have more heart attack and stroke. They took it to the next level. They did blood levels, confirmed the same thing. Higher levels of erythritol and xylitol in your bloodstream, increased risk of heart attack and stroke, statistically significant. And then they did a mechanistic study and figured out it makes your platelets sticky. So it's anti-aspirin. So if you're little, like my kid, type 1 diabetes, new onset, I'm using a little erythritol in his diet because it's keeping sugar out, but letting him still have a little bit of sweetness in his life, you know, other than having me as a dad. I mean, you know, being a kid, you know, without, I don't think it drives atherosclerosis. It makes the atherosclerosis you may already have more likely if you rupture a plaque to thrombose. Now, we're probably going to talk about that if we get into advanced surveillance and some of the strategies I use. Those erythritol, no good. Any of the other chemical ones, aspartame.
What do you see erythritol in? Like
sugar, well, it's in a lot of
the
protein
sugary
powders.
drinks.
It's in a lot of the healthy bars. If you see sugar alcohols on the label and you think you're old enough, you might have a plaque, meaning some blockages in coronary arteries or in your brain, and you don't want to have a stroke or a heart attack, probably don't eat that.
I see.
It's in all the sugar-free gums.
Okay.
So the two non-caloric sweeteners that do not appear to have any negative effect yet, and I'm just keep waiting for them to burst my bubble, are stevia, which is from a plant, very sweet, no calories, and monk fruit extract. And you can buy both of those in little bottles and use them to sweeten your tea or your coffee if you just must have the sweet taste to it. And I do. I use stevia in my coffee and in my green teas. The other thing I point out, because we should talk about liquids for our nutrition, water, you know, do your work on water. It's good for you. It looks like coffee's. The good news for most of us is coffee is actually a nutritional benefit. There are so many polyphenols and antioxidants in coffee, it probably beats vegetables. All studies that I've seen suggest that coffee across all races and nationalities seems to reduce mortality. Caveat, if you're super caffeine sensitive, do drink decaf, probably limit yourself to 100 milligrams a day. Green tea, drink a glass every day. Why not? It ain't that hard. Hey, I like, I'm going to draw a blank on the name of the brand. It's the little boxes, and they have like 50 different flavors, and I like the one that's called kombucha.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah.
There's a green tea brand that I really like. You know, you put that with a little stevia, and it's a great drink. And there's all kind of evidence that it improves the mucin in your intestinal lining, improving the integrity and enhancing your microbiome. Turns out a lot of these molecules that we're supplementing with and a lot of the effects of our diet are probably directly due to their effects on our microbiome and not as much as we would think intuitively that those molecules are actually getting into our cells and changing our cellular function. A lot of it is, no, we're altering our microbiome with some of these strategies. So avoid all of the chemical sweeteners, saccharin, aspartame, sucralose especially. It's a lot of the sports drinks, a lot of the workout formulas have sucralose to get the sugar out. It's the L isomer of sugar. It's backwards, so your body can't metabolize it, but it does a great job making your DNA age faster. So if you're looking for accelerated aging and also harms the microbiome. So simple. If you're going to put something in your food that's sweet and you don't want to try or can't stand monk fruit extract or stevia, go with some real sugar. It's natural. It's not really inflammatory, but dang it, be walking when you're drinking it or something, okay? Don't let it spike you, okay? Sugar in and itself is not toxic, and if we stay moving, we can tolerate it. But don't put the other stuff in there. Is that most of the topics? Vegetables?
I think there's one other liquid I think that people are going to be concerned
we gotta
about.
talk about it.
Alcohol.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so alcohol's another very complex subject. Most of the people in the health space are tending towards there's no safe amount of alcohol. And I can tell you that if you look at the scientific studies that analyze alcohol consumption, there is a linear dose-dependent effect for cognitive decline and for cancer. And the most common cancers affected would be those of the gastrointestinal tract, so oropharyngeal, esophageal, pancreatic, colon, and then breast. And the worst one, breast. So women, when you're drinking too much alcohol, you're increasing your risk of breast cancer. Now, even though, and there's a linear effect on cognitive decline. So the more alcohol you drink, the dumber you will become, okay? Now, there's this one little problem. All the studies, when they even try to control for other variables, show that light alcohol consumption outlives no alcohol consumption. And the consensus of most of the people who talk in this space is at this point, we're just going to have to say we're not smart enough to tease out the confounders.
The reasons, yeah.
But I do wonder about alcohol as a mild poison being another hormetic effect, just like cold exposure, heat exposure, fasting. It's a stress. And maybe a little bit of that chemical stress that, though it might increase your risk of cancer, might cause some decline in cognitive function, even at these low levels. Maybe the alcohol, the molecule itself, is having some sort of effect that does the activation of the sirtuin genes, which turn on our DNA repair genes and make our DNA younger. So I don't drink very much. I drink a drink of red wine or maybe like a vodka and a stevia soda, maybe once, twice, 3 times a week with dinner. So it's not absorbed very fast. So I'm not really feeling much of the alcohol. My wife and I like to have a glass of red wine at a nice restaurant. I'm pretty sure that's not the hill you're going to die on. If you want to look at those J-shaped curves, the deepest J-shaped curve is for red wine. Well, that's pretty simple. It's food. It's got polyphenols, antioxidants. I mean, and it's fairly low glycemic. You want to look at the lowest J-shaped curve? Beer. You're drinking a loaf of bread. And I already told you, I didn't even tell you give up the bread, but find bread substitutes, you know.
Gosh, so true.
So, in between, clear alcohols cause less cancer than dark alcohols, and don't let the mixer be a huge glycemic load. So that's why I found some Zevia, they call them Zevia sodas that are pretty tasty. All they have is, some natural flavors, carbonated water, and some stevia to make it sweet. So, I don't like gripe at my patients to get down to 0. Maybe I should. I don't have 100% confidence in this because, like, a lot of people are just kind of arguing the other side. Look, just try to get them not to drink. I'm like, you know what? The people that say it's the variables that we can't tease out, it's like, look, the people who drink that light alcohol consumption, they're healthy human beings. They have a different mindset. They're higher functioning, and there's just so many variables that fit that paradigm. The guy who's, sitting in his basement by himself getting hammered, we know he's increasing his risk of mortality. And the lonely person who doesn't drink and socialize is also having negative effects, and that science isn't able to show that that's what's causing this J-shaped curve. But I think we're also not able to prove that maybe the molecule alcohol may not be contributing to the J-shaped curve at lower levels of consumption? Answer is, I don't know. If you can keep your drinking down to, at the maximum 1 to 2 drinks per night for a male and 1 drink per night for a female, and that's defined as 1 serving of alcohol.
Yeah.
You can look that up to get the details on that. If you're drinking more than that or you're binging, that is not a longevity strategy.
Yeah.
Enough said?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for reminding me on
Yeah.
that. I didn't want to skip over alcohol.
That's all right. Let's go ahead and pause so we can move.
Sure. Good idea.
All right. So within the lifestyle prescription, we've talked about exercise. We've talked about nutrition. What are some other things that you want to tag on as far as the lifestyle prescription goes? What does that look like?
Well, pillars of health are exercise, nutrition, and we'll go to supplements because that's a way to hedge the bet on that. But we'll finish up with that because they're the smallest cog in the wheel of wellness. They can be beneficial and they're easy to do. All you got to do is open your mouth and take them. It's not nearly as hard as not opening your mouth and eating that chocolate cake or getting on the elliptical and firing off some intervals, which is painful. So sleep, huge. And I was a bad person at this, right? I mean, I've got all of the things that should have led me to a advanced aging. Doctor, I did nothing but nights for the first 10 years at the hospital, totally derailing my circadian rhythm and never really focused on it. Most of us, we can sleep when we're dead. Well, you're going to get there sooner there. Just keep that attitude up and you'll be able to activate that strategy before long. So you do need to worry about sleep. And rather than sit and try to go through all of the various components, basically they talk about sleep hygiene, which is going to bed at a consistent time, waking up at a consistent time, avoiding unnatural light. It's all tied to making sure we obey the circadian rhythm. So one of the things that I've found very helpful is a monitoring device like this Aura Ring, because I can see exactly how well I've slept at night, not just how long I was in bed, which is all I ever knew before, but how well am I doing matching my own biological clock with when I go to bed and when I wake up? And it helps to get you doing that right. How much deep sleep did I get? How much REM sleep did I get? How much was I waking up? This thing is correlated with actual sleep apnea studies. It'll rule out sleep apnea with 97% accuracy. It tells me, I'm oxygenating 97 to 99% during the night with no breaks in regularity to my breathing. So I kind of know I don't have sleep apnea, which is important. A lot of people, when I see them the first time, they're overweight and they got low energy. It's a prod differential. Sleep apnea is on it, Yeah. So if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. Stole that from Tony Robbins, who was very influential in my life. And I did read his book, Life Force, which was very well done. And he advocated these. I was already using one. So I'll get a monitoring device. I like the Aura Ring. I'll eventually have on my website kind of how I utilize it, how to navigate the app. It has another aspect to it. It has tremendous library of meditation opportunity. So it's got all these different meditations you can do on the app. And that gets us to another very important part of, kind of health, which is mindfulness, mindset, spirituality. And so, I'm no minister, although I love to bring people to Christ. I don't think that was my design, but I'm trying to be open-minded. For me, most of my mindfulness and spirituality is centered around my belief in a creator that loves me and wants me to be as beneficial to the people around me as I can. And when you take that approach to life, when you're constantly looking for what you can do that's good for other people, the daily tasks of life get easier, your energy levels improve. Prayer is a form of meditation, but do something to address that mindfulness. Stop. Don't let all the doom scroll and Instagram and Facebook and all the 15 things coming in at once. Every once in a while, you got to say, nope, shutting it all off. I'm just going to focus on my being. Yeah. I'm just going to feel myself. Let that air come in and think about it. That's, it's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around. Why does it matter? But it does. The science is there. So don't forget that one. And then I guess at this point, we'll talk a little bit about supplements because they are one of the easier strategies. So I have three things that I always tell everybody is a no-brainer, okay? Don't need to see you, don't need to do labs, don't need to look at your specific needs analysis. You should probably be taking these three things, few caveats. T3 with K2. Now, for some reason on Medscape, every week there's somebody telling us we're throwing our $5 a month away on vitamin D because there's no proof that fill in the blank. Wait till I do my vitamin D talk. I got 50 scientific studies that show very important domains of health where there is scientific proof that taking vitamin D makes a difference. I don't know why they have a vendetta against the supplement industry. I understand that the supplement industry is not well regulated and therefore there are nefarious actors. Why they are so hell-bent on getting us not to spend any money on supplementation when in reality, high-quality supplements that we know have scientific evidence that they address specific biomarkers that we know are associated with good or bad outcomes. It's like you have to take them on faith because nobody's going to do a study large enough to prove it's going to make you live longer. But we know vitamin D improves bone health, you know. Vitamin D improves immune function. People who had low vitamin D were dropping like flies in COVID. It was a huge risk factor if your vitamin D was under 20. Mine was under 20. I had a guy in medical school, and you know, I went to one of the top 5 medical schools in the country, supposedly. Some guy made it to that stage, so he's just a couple notches below God in your young, you know, malleable squash brain. And he said, people who take supplements have expensive urine. And I never took a supplement until I did Synergenics. Never took I take a lot of supplements, okay? Probably most people wouldn't tolerate how many I take. But I've carefully crafted my supplement regimen based on my own personal needs analysis, looking at specific biomarkers, understanding where I have some challenges, and then trying to hedge the bets on top of what I consider to be a great nutritional strategy. Vitamin D3/K2. I will tell you that anybody in Alaska is lucky if they're at 20.
Well, if they say that everyone is vitamin D deficient, and Alaskans have to be
the worst.
The worst.
Saw a 9, which was the lowest I've ever seen. But you know, I shoot for a level of about 50 to 80. I have made a kidney stone before, so for people who have calcium oxalate crystals in their urine, and I watch for that, I try to keep them closer to 50 because it does put some increased risk of nephrocalcinosis. That means kidney stones.
I didn't know that.
I'm comfortable with you getting up towards 80 if you're not making crystals.
Okay.
And so that's kind of a no-brainer. 90% of people, based on me, I check these labs regularly. My patients will achieve 50 to 80 with 5,000 units and 90 micrograms of K2. You want the K2 because that channels the calcium into our bones and away from our blood vessels, okay? Second no-brainer, fish oil. The caveat on vitamin D, if you're a surfer in Hawaii or a roofer in Texas, you're probably getting what you need from the sun.
Sure.
Okay, we were all day long gathering. We got up every morning, went outside and walked around foraging and maybe once in a while chased an antelope so we got an interval in. But we were outside gathering sun, generally warm climates, most of our evolutionary history, and we were gaining a bunch of vitamin D, the best kind, through our skin. Most of us are stuck in a gloomy basement.
I think Casey Means said 90% of like our daily lives are spent within the confines of some kind of box, whether it's your workplace, house, car. We don't go outside.
Correct. So most of us are not going to get enough conversion from the sun through the normal mechanism of producing vitamin D, and you can take it and it is effective and it does reduce the biomarkers associated with low vitamin D. So you can supplement it. It works. It's reasonable. It's inexpensive. The caveat for fish oil, if you're eating salmon and the black cod, you know, and those high fat fish, sardines all the time, you're eating fish oil.
How does halibut rank up in there?
Not much.
Not much?
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of fat. That's why it dries out easy. But when you're eating those fatty fish, especially the small cold water fish, which are going to be less likely to accumulate mercury, you're getting the protein and you're getting the omega-3 fatty acids. Most of us are not going to eat enough fish to get to where I think you want your cell walls to be populated about 50-50 omega-3 to omega-6. The average American is about 1 to 5. They got 5 times as much omega-6. Omega-6s are inflammatory. When your body responds to injury or illness, it will be creating way more inflammatory prostaglandins, leukotrienes, and echinosoids, these chemical messengers that go and signal other cells, bring cells in. You get more pain, more redness, more inflammation. Inflammation is another driver of disease. You do not want to be shifted towards the inflammatory balance. If you think you can get there through nutrition, great. You want to have a lot of omega-6, just make sure you cook everything in corn oil. Couple of McDonald's French fries gives you your omega-6 needs for the day.
He's joking.
Okay? No, I'm dead serious. Two McDonald's French fries, you got enough omega-6 for today. But it's in everything else you're eating too. I mean, there's a little omega-6 in walnuts and in almonds, but there's also omega-3s. The foods we used to eat were in balance. We probably were eating a lot from the ocean. We generally probably mostly evolved on the coast. I'm sure just about every river we set up an encampment at had some sort of Andromeda's fish we were pillaging for 2 months a year. We were smart and we got a lot of omegas in our diet. We don't anymore. We moved inland. We started growing food, mechanized agriculture. Now our diets are way higher in omega-6 and way lower in omega-3. Easy hedge. Get a high-quality fish oil. Triglyceride formula, preferred. Nordic Naturals is a good one. We have our own one that I get through the company that helps me manage my whole medical practice, Synergenics, and I've been taking it for years. I've done my blood. I'm about 57% omega-3s in my cell walls by taking 1 capsule twice a day with meals. It's a little more expensive than vitamin D because it's expensive, to get the fish. It's expensive to molecularly distill it, which is important. If it's not molecularly distilled, it could have mercury in it. It'll also taste fishy if you burp them or something. That's a no-brainer. What's the next no-brainer? I think a high-quality probiotic makes sense. Now, I've been drilling down on the microbiome, and, we'd have to have a whole nother talk. I mean, you could just go for days. There's so much evidence that it's the new frontier in medicine. So much of our health is dictated by the 70 trillion bacteria that live inside our intestine, okay? They're signaling our brain, telling us what to eat because they want what they need. And guess what the bad bugs want? What would you guess?
The bad bugs?
What are the bad bugs? If you have a bad microbiome, what is it driving you to eat?
They want sugar.
Sugar.
Carbs.
They want sugar. And bad bacteria live on sugar. Healthy bacteria want resistant starches, things that are in, vegetables, fruits, those plant molecules that don't break down. They control your mood, they control your energy, they help with your digestion, they determine whether your intestinal lining, your barrier to the foods you're eating. You don't want the food you're eating getting into your bloodstream intact. Your body attacks it. I told you I have almost no IgG to any foods. I have a healthy microbiome. I see people that are lit up. They also have autoimmune disease and all this other stuff. There's a correlation. So anyways, a high quality probiotic. The one I take is individually blister sealed. It's 100 billion colony forming units of 2 different species of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. It's blister sealed in nitrogen, each capsule, so that when you open the bottle, the oxygen doesn't start killing the other pills. And then the capsules need to be digestion resistant so that you don't have the acid in your stomach killing the product. But that's the hedge. The real benefit to get your microbiome health squared away, well documented and discussed, I think, for a layperson level book is William Davis' Super Gut. At the end of the book, the last quarter is recipes for making your own kefirs, your own yogurts, your own sauerkraut, your own kimchi, all that stuff. And he even tells you where you can source the bacteria to start your own fermented foods. I'm trying to talk my wife into it, but she's her bandwidth is a little heavily utilized right now. So I'm still just buying store-bought. But if you look at yogurts and stuff, you want to make sure they have live bacterial cultures. The kefirs in particular have a lot of different bacteria, and these are generally the ones that have been studied that seem to create the kumbaya, not a supplement, back to diet, eat fermented foods. What are some other supplements that are really reasonable and pretty close to making the no-brainer list? Magnesium at night. Sleep, most of us ER docs are got that magnesium on standby when we're taking care of that critical cardiac patient, or a lot of times I just give them 2 grams of magnesium IV because, you get low levels of magnesium and can trigger arrhythmias. And that's an abnormal heart rate that can result in death. Yeah. So, magnesium is inexpensive. It helps sleep. It helps relax your muscles. It helps reduce muscle cramps, and it's dirt cheap. So it's pretty easy. Most of my patients, I put them on 500 milligrams of magnesium orotate. There's different formulations. You can go deep into this one and have 3 different kinds. One gets into your brain more and whatever. Take some magnesium. Another near no-brainer. Well, I like berberine. Okay? Berberine. You're probably noticing that there's some retail market stuff coming out. Walmart, Force Factor, they're doing all the things I'm recommending. But I've been doing these for 10 years, okay? So berberine is a plant-based alkaloid, probably was very high in our diet long ago, probably the plants we eat now, with mass farming, there's less of these molecules in them. And it turns out that berberine is as potent at reducing average blood sugar as metformin, which is the first-line treatment for diabetes. But it has some other interesting effects. I've got a double-blind clinical controlled trial, meaning that they took people and they gave them berberine, and they took people and they gave them fake pills, and they followed these biomarkers over time. And they showed that the people in the berberine treatment group had lower average blood sugar, lower hemoglobin A1C, but also lower LDL, lower triglycerides, and those all met statistical significance. Now, they had lower weight, but it didn't meet statistical significance compared to the control group. But when you look at a meta-analysis of berberine studies, if you examine weight, it does meet statistical significance. So when the GLP-1s first came out and they started hitting the thing, there were some Nature's GLP-1 people trying to sell berberine. Now, it ain't going to work nearly as good as that. But I've been on our Glucomax Protect, which is a combination of berberine with alpha lipoic acid, another molecule that seems to improve our insulin sensitivity. Basically, since I learned about it, at least 10 years, because I know I have 9 genes that predispose me to type 2 diabetes. And as I said, I'm not demonstrating any effect. Now, I would attribute that to my muscle mass and my commitment to the lifestyle prescription, but I can't rule out that it's not contributing, and I think it's a valuable enough intervention that I'm going to stick with it. Another potential no-brainer, highly bioavailable curcumin. So turmeric is the plant that has curcumins in it, and these are very potent anti-inflammatories, and we understand mechanism of action. I want to say Casey Means even points out, I want to say it was downregulates NRF2, which is a gene that causes inflammation. But at any rate, what sold me on that, I happen to have one of the genes on my cholesterol proteins called the ApoE protein. There's 3 different types that you can inherit. You can get a 2, which is like, you're lucky if you get the 2. My sister got that. 3, which is the wild type. About 70% of the genes in the community are 3. And then 4, which is the bad one. Well, I got 1 copy. If you have 1 copy of ApoE4, instead of, got one from mom or dad, but not the other, your risk of Alzheimer's dementia is about 2.5 to 4 times greater. If you get 2 copies, they say it's 12 to 16 times greater. So I got 1. But 2 days after I found out that I had 1 copy of ApoE4, this scientific paper showed up on Medscape, and I read it. I'm like, thanks, God. And it was specifically about a form of highly bioavailable curcumin, like the one I take. So it's absorbed very well, because when you eat turmeric, not a lot. You're probably affecting your microbiome more than you're getting into the cell. Okay. Well, they took 200 cognitively impaired adults ages 50 to 80. They got a control group and a treatment group. They measured brain amyloid using a brain MRI with a special contrast that helped that protein in the brain show up. So amyloid is seen to replace brain tissue in people with Alzheimer's disease. We're not calling it the root cause, but it's definitely a sign that you have Alzheimer's. It's correlated with Alzheimer's disease. There's more amyloid in people's brains when they have Alzheimer's. So they measured brain amyloid in both groups, randomly assigned 200 people that had mild cognitive impairment, and they were in between the ages of 50 and 80. Well, what they found was that, and then they also did the CNS vital sign test like the one I do on my patients. And so what they found was the treatment group 18 months later had no change in brain amyloid, and their cognitive tests were preserved, specifically with regards to global memory and attention span. And in the control group that got the fake intervention, they had a statistically significant increase in brain amyloid, and they had declines in global memory and in attention span that were statistically significant. So I'm like, well, I'm on that the rest of my life, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I take a lot of other stuff. I do take zinc, and I take, I take a CBD oil at night because I think they can help with sleep. I take, vitamin C, but it's in the form of workout powder. I do like the beet extracts for nitric oxide production. And I do use a professional grade one that you actually have to prescribe and helps lower blood pressure. That kind of covers the no-brainers. I mean, everything else, I've got a lot, B vitamins. It's like if your homocysteine is great, and, it's like, some people have great metabolism. I know from my genome, I have a defect in folate metabolism. It turned out that when I stopped eating grain, which is fortified with folate in this country, my homocysteine climbed. And then I watched it for a couple years and said, well, it's not real high, but it's higher than I want it. It's not under 9. I started taking, a broad spectrum B vitamin supplement, and within a couple years, I'd driven it down below 8, and I've never seen 8 again. I'm 6 or 7 every time. So, there's a lot of things you can talk about in the supplement industry. I think those are reasonable, hedge the bet. The berberines, the highly bioavailable curcumin and fish oil, and a good quality probiotic, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
So you want to buy ones that are independent, third-party tested, open labeled. Don't buy something that's the proprietary blend. That means they sprinkled a little of the stuff that's in there that's good, and they sold you a pill full of wheat germ and probably told you that it was gluten-free. Okay.
What's creatine, well discussed, well studied. It's everywhere. You can find it. Different brands, you can find it pretty expensive, but relatively pretty affordable. Creatine's role when you have, if your diet is kind of what we discussed, what is creatine's role? Do you feel like maybe if you're not ingesting enough, animal protein, that maybe your creatine needs would be higher? What are your recommendations on, dose, maintenance dose, that kind of stuff?
I just tell people 5 grams a day is safe. And if you go over that, I've seen people start bumping their kidney numbers. Okay. And even if you're eating. So my creatine is contained in my Power, which is the workout, my pre-workout. Okay. It has creatine and some hawthorn extract and some cordyceps extract and some L-citrulline. And these are some kind of ATP generating. It's got the beetroot extract in it. So it's causing some vasodilatation and improving cardiac output a little bit. Scientific studies show that. And it has 5 grams of creatine in the form of Crea Magna Power. I think it's a patented formula that's within our formula. So, 5 grams, watch it. I've had people on 10 and 15, and I'm like, you're going to kidney failure. What? And then I finally get to, it's and I put them on our workout formula and didn't. And so now I know it's like, hey, look, if you want our workout formula, I love it. Yeah. It's got a lot of stuff that I like. But if you're already taking creatine, stop, or you're going to be taking too much creatine. I
see. Okay.
And then, I do a recovery formula, and it's got a bunch of poultices in it. The big actor is the branched chain amino acids, and then again, like some L-glutamine and stuff like that help you process, protein and assimilate it into, because now you're trying to recover, And so, I do like formulations like that. I've been using our Power and our recovery every day I work out for 10, 12 years. It's a N of 1, so I can't tell you I wouldn't be the man I am today if I wasn't using those. Sure. But I've studied the science, the patents, the patented powders within our powders, easy to get to that data. They're high quality. They're independent, third-party tested, and they're probably useful. Look, I'm trying to set this. What my goal is to inspire people, to convince them they can create this version of their genome, the version of my genome that I'm demonstrating through the epigenetic phenomena, the genes that I'm turning on based on my diet, my behavior, my microbiome, my, going outside and being in the wilderness when I can, and oxytocin levels flooding me, and all that little good, trying to sleep right. The version of my genome that I've turned on is one that demonstrates the healthy profile. Okay. Everybody has access to this, but it's not easy. You've got to decide you're going to not just learn the science, you got to apply it. It's a bunch of little things that aren't that tough. By far, the hardest thing is the exercise. My patients tell me all the time, you were right, doc. You convinced me I needed to change how I ate, and I did what you said, and you were right. Now it's easy. It's like, I actually like how I eat better now. I'm just not addicted to all that crap anymore. And I'm like, yeah, if you can do it for 30 days, you're there. Okay. I mean, you gotta give up the addiction for 30 days. And I tell people all the time at my office, I go, you know what? You'll probably do pretty good on the nutrition plan. I hopefully spend enough time convincing you've got some real issues with how you're eating, because we go through your whole, we make you fill out a questionnaire about a typical day and a bad day. And, and I'm like, and here's why I think you're going to do okay. Because I know you're going to eat. I am 100%, 100% confident you are going to eat. Yeah. So I'm just trying to get you to change the way you do something that I know you're going to do. Yeah. The problem is a lot of my patients, I get older people, now they're starting to recognize that maybe they better take a little ownership, and they're non-exercisers. And I don't know they're going to exercise. The reason that my survival of the fittest, the strong survive video and the diagram that or not the diagram, the 12-page document that I created that's also on the website. The reason I did that is because last February I had 3 first-time annuals, meaning I'd seen these patients a year before. They come in, man, I feel great on the hormones. Yeah, man, sex life's doing better. I think I've lost some weight. I'm doing pretty good. I made a lot of the changes. I'm not eating near as much sugar, but I'm definitely eating more vegetables. Man, I'm doing good. Great. Hey, how's the exercise going? Well, I didn't ever join a gym. I never got the heart rate monitor, and I'm like, and I had 3 of those in a row, and I lost my mind. I spent a whole weekend writing those 12 documents. I went through my exercise scientific study archives. I started opening folders on resistance training, basically cardiovascular training, and sort of also, strength and cardiovascular testing and how it compared to mortality. And I said, look at all this obvious evidence that it's the dumbest thing in the world not to exercise, It's like, I can show you, do you want to see if you're not strong, you die. If you're not fit, you die. If you don't follow the exercise guidelines, you die, or at least more than the people that are demonstrating that they are doing those things. And so I've spent a whole weekend. It took me like 2 days, and then I did the video on it because I thought, boy, I swear I'm harping on exercise in my initial assessments, but I must not be penetrating the void. So that was my attempt at penetrating the void.
One of the last things I want to talk about is your faith. I think, a critic would say, Dr. Bob's longevity, Dr. Bob wants to live forever, but obviously 1 and 1 die. Eventually we all get there. But where does your faith in God and, your mission on longevity, practicing these health concepts yourself and with your patients, where does that intersection at?
At this point, I'm relying, and this is going to scare some people off, and that's fine. I mean, I'm more than willing to take care of a person that doesn't have Christian faith. Look, I love all people and I want to help everybody. But the amount of information that's going to assault us in the space of science is overwhelming. AI is cranking this stuff out so fast. My Medscape inbox, I've got a few different sites that send me current scientific evidence according to my fields of interest. 5 years ago, I got a Medscape that might have 3 or 4 articles every 2 or 3 days that I would look at. Don't care. Okay, I'm going to save that one. I'm going to read that right now. I like that one enough. I'm labeling it, putting it in a folder under this subject. I get 3 or 4 of those a day now, and they all got 9 articles in them. Who can keep up? I know of no other way except to, and I'm not a biblical scholar, so I'm not going to quote this properly, even though I listen to Proverbs. It's my favorite book in the Bible, because I think if we all just sort of did what Proverbs said, whether we were Christians or not, the world would be a very nice place, okay? That was always been my favorite book. It's Proverbs 3:5-6, and basically it says, just let God guide you. That's on my wall in my office, and I literally want faith to help me not click on the clickbait and click on the studies I need to know, understand them with clarity, and then digest them without my own personal bias, and then be able to inspire people to improve their health by communicating that information in a way that is easy to understand, digestible. And I have a very strong relationship with the Lord. I kind of believed in God as a naive little child, very young age. I feel like he revealed himself to me through a prayer that I had. It could have just been the coincidence of the universe, but I choose to think, nope, he wanted me to know right then. I like the fact that you're talking to me, kid. I've been talking to him ever since. And more recently, in the last 5 years, my spiritual growth has been much more, disciplined, where I'm really working at it. And I would say that I've had something that's transformed me in a way I never thought possible in the last couple of months. And someday I'll share that under my mindset spirituality section of my health hub. But it's a little deep for this particular day. But it is a strategy that I use that helps me keep that at the forefront of my thought every day. And it has changed the joy that I see in every activity. And to me, that's the solution, is have a relationship with the universe. I mean, and it's there for you if you want it, and it's soothing, and it improves your physiology. Kind of how I use faith. I ask for direction. I mean, I just pray that my pathway will be directed every day by that higher power.
Yeah, and I think like we were talking about before, whatever dreams, aspirations, goals that you have, whatever you believe, that God put you on this planet for a purpose, you're the vessel to make that happen. We're not puppets. We have to put in the work. We have to make moves towards that. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, that's not going to gain much momentum at all. And I see the value in what you're doing. I see how the critic could point out that, what's the point of, trying to do all these biohacks, to live longer. And it's really, when you boil it down to, it's like, what do you care about? Do you care about your spouse? Do you care about your family? Do you care about those goals or dreams that you have? Because if you're not taking care of yourself first, those other things are going to suffer. You're not going to get to enjoy them as long as you would have
if
otherwise.
You want to have impact, you have to be well.
Yeah.
And if you want to have longitudinal impact, you have to be well for a long time.
If you want to have impact, you have to be well.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how long are you going to be here to help out with that grandkid or just your fellow man through charity, whatever? I mean, I want to be healthy. I want to be prosperous, so I can give more, and it just keeps feeding itself. And it's a great place to be. I mean, there's a lot of really, really nice things about getting older. Your mentality changes, the way you think changes, and it's just great if I can help people reach this place at a healthier position. There's a couple of things that are pet peeves of mine, in the medical 2.0 approach. Again, not criticizing the individual doctors, but the overall approach, which is not controlled by the doctors. Most of them are as frustrated by this as I am. They're just stuck in that model. They have to do what insurance says, and they do the models that they're passed down from the CDC and the FDA, these regulatory agencies that ultimately were appointed by the pharmaceutical industry, because that's how lobbying works, One is they don't look to seek evidence of insulin insensitivity earlier than the development of type 2 diabetes. And the other is, and this is the big one, We don't search for evidence of cardiovascular disease until you have symptoms. So think about this. Statistically, somewhere between 25 and 30% of us will die of a heart attack if we live in an industrialized nation. The most common cause of death in the industrialized nation. Our approach in Medicine 2.0 is, we'll check you out if you have symptoms. 50% of people who have coronary artery disease find out they have coronary artery disease by having a heart attack. Okay? What's worse yet, 1 in 4 people who have a heart attack have sudden death. Now, I was told there would be no math, but I come out with 1 in 8 people find out they have coronary artery disease by being dead. Okay. There is technology available, not in the state, but I mean, it's available, but not utilized. But in outside where there's competition for outpatient radiology services, I can send a person down to any major metropolitan area in the lower 48, get a CT coronary angiogram, a test that's minimally invasive. They got to start an IV, give you a little dye. Get a CAT scan of your heart that looks at the arteries in your heart. Have artificial intelligence quantify and qualify the plaques in those arteries right now, okay? Are there any? If it's stage 0, I've had 1 of those since I've been doing this. Repeat it in 5 years. Don't do anything different, okay? If it's stage 1, meaning there is any plaque at all, but not a lot of plaque, you repeat it in 3 years, and you come up with a strategy. Now, in some of my patients, it may be, well, you've been sitting on the couch, you got fat, you eat like crap. The strategy could be do everything I told you in the lifestyle prescription. We're going to call that an intervention, but you've made disease at this point in your life with your genetics and your 50 years on planet Earth and the life you've led, it's resulted in disease. What are we going to do to stop this? Because it's going to kill you if we just let it keep progressing. But this test tells me if the plaque's soft, if it's calcified, if it's rotten. If it's rotten, that's an emergency. I'm talking, thank God for the pharmaceutical industry now. You need some statin to stabilize that plaque. And yes, it's going to also help lower your LDL. But the people who aren't making disease don't need those medicines. I don't care what their LDL is, okay? This is precision medicine. Don't manage the patient according to the population. But when you have access to technologies like this and you don't use them, that's on you. I mean, that test is $1,570. Turnkey. I'm looking at your heart, sharing it with you on a monitor through a Zoom meeting, or you come by and we both look at it. I'm looking at the arteries. I'm spinning your heart around and we're doing cross sections as we slide up and down the artery. Look at that little red dot there. That's rotten plaque. That's dangerous. The cardiologists that developed this test a couple of years ago, when they presented it to us, they said they'd been running this test now in their practice for 4 years, and they said they did not have an existing patient have a heart attack, 4 cardiologists in 4 years. Wow. And they attributed it to the fact that when you show a patient their actual arteries in this kind of 3-dimensional, very well demonstrated concrete fashion, they're like, oh, that's bad? You're like, yeah, that's bad. Yeah. And they're like, okay, so take my aspirin and my Crestor and actually exercise. That'd be a good idea. They do it.
This isn't a diagram on the wall that they're pointing at. This is your heart.
It creates conviction that they have the disease, and it creates motivation to reverse it, because it scares them a little, probably. Hey, whatever creates compliance. So they think that that's a big part of it. And then the second part is they repeat the testing at reasonable intervals based on severity to make sure the current strategy is working. Now, I had a family member that had a heart attack, and I now have a clearly analysis on him, but the process for Medicine 2.0 is, okay, well, we threw a stent in it, call us when you have symptoms again. Well, they put them on, they do they increase the medical intervention? Yeah. But do they do anything to prove it's working? No, you go right back into the pile of let's wait and see if you have another heart attack. The sad part is the American Academy of Cardiologists, if that's the right acronym, came out with their position statement on CT coronary angiogram and calcium score. The calcium score, they recommend, and they recommend against CT coronary angiogram. And, before I
recommend against
it. Don't utilize it for screening, but calcium score is okay. Now, I'll start with the calcium score is measured in a thing called Agustin units. That's the last name of the dude who invented it. Now he comes to the monthly Clearly webinars that we do to keep up with this new technology with the company that developed the test. And he's a famous cardiologist who lectures for Clearly, who doesn't use calcium scores. He invented the test. He uses Clearly. But the cardiologists aren't standing behind it. And it's back to the corruption, not all cardiologists, okay? I don't need it's back to the corruption in medicine, which is you get a bunch of people that get to set the guidelines. If there's 15 of them and 8 of them go, if we embrace CT coronary angiogram, we're no longer doing diagnostic coronary angiograms, which is a big part. And you know what? If everybody's got a CT coronary angiogram with AI interpretation, what's the point of doing stress tests? I mean, look, there's no point in doing a stress test on me. Okay, if I have chest pain, it's not my heart unless I'm having a heart attack. I could have a tiny plaque rupture and clog off the whole artery. Unlikely to happen because my inflammatory markers are so low. I don't have sticky platelets, I don't think. I'm doing all the right things that make that highly unlikely. But I'm either having a heart attack or I'm not. If I don't have a heart attack, I don't need a stress test because I know my coronary arteries are widely patent. 70% of heart attacks occur in blood vessels that aren't narrowed enough to flunk a stress test. So if you get seen in the ER for chest pain, and then I go, you know, you didn't have a heart attack based on your EKG, and we looked at the muscle test, you know, and you didn't release any enzymes suggesting you damaged any heart muscle, but you could have angina, so you should go do a stress test. Well, 70% of the people that are going to have a heart attack tomorrow pass the stress test because the vessels aren't narrow enough to block the blood flow so much that adequate blood isn't being delivered to the heart muscle at higher demand to cause symptoms. So they pass the stress test, and then they rupture that plaque that didn't trigger the changes on EKG with exercise. They form a clot, they have a heart attack. We didn't learn anything useful except they don't have a severe blockage. You do a Clearly analysis on that person. If I see him in the ER a week later, I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at your Clearly. You don't even have coronary artery disease. So don't even do the EKG, nurse. It's not his heart, you know? It's like, but maybe we better think about a blood clot. But I always worry when I recognize that a technology that is relatively inexpensive and now readily available that will replace somebody's turf and significantly impact their own financial well-being, I worry that they may not adjust the guidelines based on what's best for us, but they may. And if they understand clearly, I don't know how they could come to anything but this should be the colonoscopy of the heart on people age 50 and older. We should probably, just like colonoscopy, high-risk people, they should be getting it at age 40. Biggest fumble I can think of in medicine, minus that we don't routinely replace hormones at the time of menopause in the vast majority of our female patients.
DrBobsLongevity.com. Tell me, what's the purpose of that? Is that how the best way for people to get in touch with you? What is your goal with what you're doing on the peninsula? What do you want to see?
Well, the purpose of the website, so most of my practice has come from either word of mouth or a headhunter website that canvassed me when they saw I opened my clinic in 2016. So I've been paying these guys to run this website that's not Dr. Bob's Longevity, but these guys are experts at making somebody who's like, oh, I need hormones or weight loss. I come up. If they click on that website and they bite and they call the 907 number, it makes my cell phone ring. And I had learned over a few years ago that that was going to cost me an hour of just sitting and talking to basically explain a lot of the stuff we've talked about. I'm usually, you know, first I get their needs analysis. Why do they think they need me? Then I start to talk about, you know, a lot of this is, and then, it's advanced diagnosis. It's a lot to talk about. And I realized it was eating a lot of my time. And sometimes you get to the end and go, you know, it's not covered by insurance. And they're like, oh, you don't take. Yeah, it's like, look, your insurance is likely to cover a lot of my annual evaluation under the umbrella of your annual health and wellness assessment, history and physical and wellness panel. So you'll get some money back probably, but I'm not billing your insurance. You got to pay me to do what I do. So it's like, so you spend an hour talking to somebody and then they're like, don't take, state Medicaid.
Sure.
No, they're not going to pay me to do what I do. Okay. So I thought, okay, I got to build a website that tells what I do. So the original purpose of that website was to describe my why, how I arrived where I did, and my what. What do I do if you decide you want to enter our practice? And I have 2 other practitioners that are helping me now and going to be getting most of my new patients because I'm starting to run out of bandwidth. That was the original part. But then I realized long range, it was going to be where I was going to be able to do what I really want to do, which is transmit this kind of information like through a podcast, but I'm going to do a video format. So I've been studying the 2 videos, or all the videos on there were done with a very low skill set. I can record a video, okay, which is me looking at a camera. I don't have any way to import media or B-roll or any of that. I didn't know how to do any of that. Well, this winter, fall winter, my goal, one of my goals in my list under business was to become expert at this model that I'm using, this platform called Descript. And I think I've got my skill set there. So you're going to see some higher quality videos. And the Health Hub is going to be where I'm going to talk about continuous glucose monitoring and how to do it and how to utilize it and what I learned by doing it on me. Hey, let's kind of do what the Oura Ring, let me show you all the stuff I look at on my Oura Ring and how I use it for health, or redo the Dr. Bob's advanced cardiovascular risk stratification video, which right now I face the computer towards my drawing board and I'm writing on it. Now I've got like real. So ultimately, I want to create an archive that's accessible by anybody.
That's awesome.
If they want to know how I feel about how to take care of yourself, but can't be a patient because you're too far away, or don't have the financial wherewithal, or you're young enough that you probably don't need a lot of the stuff I'm doing. Hormones are still great. That's not going to be an issue. But hey, you want to get in on following my approach. You think, hey, maybe this guy who pays attention to our creator and begs him to put the right information in front of him, who managed to, do pretty good in med school at a top quality med school, practiced emergency medicine for 30 years and never talked to a lawyer. Maybe he's not that dumb. And if he's got God behind him, hey, I want to know what he knows. That sounds like a great approach. That's me. I mean, that's what's going to be there. And I'm going to start, I go to Cabo, I get into the sunshine and the warmth and some surfing. I'm headed that direction in a week, and I'll have 10 days. I'm going to be able to start generating the content because I'm trained up now on how to do it. So that's what you could look for there. But if you really want to get a real in-depth understanding of what the entire process is, and are interested in becoming a patient, if you go to Dr. Bob's Longevity, it doesn't have a period or any capitalization.
Links and everything for drbobslongevity.com. No worries there.
That if you go there, you can understand, what our approach is, and you may read through it. I did it where you can either watch a video or read what I said in the video. And so that those that would rather read, and you can breeze through that website. And then eventually, like I said, the Health Hub, I'm going to populate. The other thing I'm doing is I've done some demonstration under my own clinical health records, which I sort of freely share, that you can see that I'm defying my risks through following the strategies. And I may try to write a book someday. I don't think I can outdo Peter Attia. He did an amazing job, and he's obviously a brilliant man, engineer brain. He covered most of the high-level science, probably a little more in depth than the average layperson really wants to know. I think Casey Means did a phenomenal job and both of them corrected big problems in themselves. Well, I presume Attia did. He's never shared that. Casey Means gave herself metabolic syndrome as an ENT, as an ENT resident. And she was a hard charger, right? She was publishing papers and all of this. Never practiced after residency, decided to study health. Did a great job. Gets into the weeds pretty deep also. But I endorse everything she says about the lifestyle prescription, except don't use erythritol or sugar alcohols. She points out a lot of these high level concepts. I think I might write the book someday. Hey, look, I'm going to show you my genome, talk about my family history, show you my risks, show you my transformation, and kind of show how I have defied my risks at each point, because I got a lot of information on myself. I mean, I got my whole genome, so we can go through risks and, with regards to autoimmune disease, never demonstrated it, ton of genes. Both my kids now have it. Long story. I mean, they got delivered by C-section. They missed out on mom's microbiome during vaginal delivery. Didn't know that was a thing. Read William Davis's book or Martin Blazer's book. He's a gastroenterologist that does a lot of studying, clinical research in microbiome. C-section delivered babies don't have the same microbiomes as those that get delivered through the birth canal. That's when we get inoculated with the biome. So, I think that's something that maybe one day I'll do, but on my health site, you can see, that I got the Alzheimer's gene, but my cognitive function is no concern yet. I've got diabetes risk, but my insulin sensitivity, my fasting blood sugars, my average blood sugars are in the excellent range. I have bad lipid panel, and I got a bad lipid panel. That's my cholesterol. My liver makes my cholesterol packages not a great setting, and I'm experimenting with pharmaceutical interventions very carefully in myself, because I also have the gene for statin myopathy, which is 5% of the population, and I have it. And I've experimented with Crestor 10 milligrams. It's hard to walk upstairs. So it's I can't use that tool bag trick. So I have to figure out other strategies. Trivial coronary artery disease. I had a tiny plaque when I did my Clearly. I'm coming up on 4 years, so I'm going to repeat it in April. So cross my fingers, since I really couldn't use much in the way of pharmaceutical intervention. But that's what's there on the site. It's pretty open, and it gives you my cell phone number. If you're interested in exploring whether one of us can take care of you, I'm more than happy to have because generally when I get the call from the other site, I give them about 5 minutes. Tell me a little bit why you want to see me. Okay, great. Here's what you need to do. Go to Dr. Bob's Longevity. You read through that. You digest that. If you want to be scrutinized this hard,
give me a call.
Give me a call back, and then I'll send you basically how the practice pricing structure works and all of that. So that's kind of the approach, and that's why that site lives. But I'm hoping to make that site valuable for people who just want to, do a better job taking care of themselves, but don't actually need the clinical part of the interventions. They don't need hormones and that kind of thing. Or they maybe have access to a doc who will give them the hormones, but doesn't have the other lifestyle stuff dialed in.
Well, you're a treasure to have here on the peninsula. Like I said in the beginning, your level of expertise, obsession, you called it an obsession. I'll call it an obsession with health and wellness. It's something that to have here on the peninsula, accessible to Alaskans. If you're talking to people from across the country, it must be super easy to talk to someone down the road in Anchorage, Fairbanks, here on the peninsula, to know that there's that high level resource right here is amazing. And this conversation is just the beginning. Sure, we'll have you back here to talk about maybe different specific topics. drbobslongevity.com. If you're interested, be sure to check that out directly and give him a call.
Call my cell phone and I'll get your information. I'll send you an email going over things, be talking about interfacing with either Dr. Bradstreet or another nurse practitioner that is also studying to do what I do, because I need help. I'm at the point now where it's okay, the marketing's working. I can't see all these people myself. And I really want to be the person that is providing the access to the scientific evidence and the interpretation and the inspiration more than just buried in the clinical work of documenting charts. I mean, I spend 8 hours with a patient, and then I'm documenting for an hour and a half afterwards, And so it's a every patient takes out an entire day. So you can kind of see where I can't have 500 of you. It's not like a regular, an average medical practice has 2,000 patients. This kind of practice, 200 is a busy practice because of you're so available to them too. I mean, they all have my cell phone. They text me if they have minor problems, and so You know, and I have to keep mine a little bit below that because I do goof off for 4 months a year, flying a beaver and running a fishing lodge, and we'll probably do that.
We haven't even went down the road of All Alaska Outdoors Lodge. Google that while you're at it too, just to get a glimpse into. This isn't just some random doctor. This is an Alaskan doing Alaskan things, and just so happens, I don't know, either way you look at it, so happens to be an expert on health and wellness, or expert in health and wellness, so happens to have a lodge here on the peninsula. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Man,
I know you're a busy guy,
I'm honored.
We'll see you again shortly.
Well, I think, you know, I'm so impressed with your setup here, and you've got this all figured out. I'm honored to be the first guest, and I hope some people enjoyed it, learned some stuff that might have helped them or maybe inspired them, you know, and to start to do some little things to slow down the speed of aging, because at the end of the day, aging is the disease, and the science is unraveling how to slow it down.
Thanks, Bob.
Good to see you.